Hey everyone, welcome to Golf Podcasts USA, the local golf podcast network built to tell golf stories in every state. I'm Brett Smith, and today we've got a special episode because we're stepping off the scorecard and into a story. Today, my guest is author Rich Poggi, and he's here to talk about his novel, Fairways and Greens, and a golf story that is really about second chances, legacy, and a shot you never planned to hit. The heart of the book is Doug Parker, once on a path towards PGA Tour stardom until an injury and his own choices knocked him off course. Years later, he rebuilt his life at the club where he grew up, and now he's fighting to keep that golf club alive until a phone call from the past forces everything back on the table. Rich also talks about the philosophy behind the title, Fairways and Greens, a father's no-nonsense approach, smart play, staying disciplined, keeping emotions out of it, and giving yourself a putt for par. All right, let's get into it. Here's Rich Poggi. What's up, Rich?
Hey, Brett. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I'm pretty pumped about not only today's conversation, but what you guys are doing, what namely you're doing with the network. I think it's a great foundation, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. I think there's a need for what you're doing, especially across the country, and the fact that you've put the infrastructure in place. I think it's going to be great. And again, being part of it early is making me happy.
I appreciate
So,
that.
wow, cool. So Doug Parker, Doug Parker is the protagonist in my story. He's, a former PGA pro, kind of like a prodigy per se, but through his own, issues, a bad breakup and an injury, he kind of went off the tracks a little bit, 30 years or so ago, and decided to retreat back to his roots in New Jersey, a golf course that his father was the pro at 30 years. Been a teaching pro until a bunch of stuff happens, hence Fairways and Greens, a novel.
So, what's Doug's point of no return? What's the moment where his life split into the before and after?
Well, when he was playing, it was more about, finding the rough more than the fairway, drinking a little bit. And I guess, this is a redemption rediscovery story, Brett. But, usually the ones that Hollywood does, the guy is in rehab, or there's a musician or some failed business person that comes and has to fix something in their life. Doug kind of addressed all of his baggage years and years ago, and his point, as you ask, was to go back home and grow the game, become a master teaching PGA teaching professional, and kind of just live his life in New Jersey and stay away from the big stage, and all that pressure it put on him and some of the pulls it brought him. So he really doesn't have a major break until, like I said, we join him in the story, and then there's a couple of things, right, that are pulling at him, and like anybody else, we all like our routines. So Doug is kind of being hit with a real estate development company that's going after some of his expiring memberships, trying to buy land and kind of make his beautiful golf only track a 9-hole kind of pitch and putt course with condos on it. So he's fighting that. And then he's got some other issues that he's dealing with a member who's kind of been indicted for something that he didn't do. That's pulling at his strings. And then he gets that call, right? He gets a call about needing to address something that he didn't know about from years gone by in his pro golf days. And now he's got to kind of jump into that with some very strict guidelines on how he can affect what's the problem that he's been given. And that's where he turns to, his golf lessons to kind of, affect an outcome that is in his best interest and moves his character along throughout the story.
So, why is it set at like a storied New Jersey club? What does that backdrop let you say that another setting wouldn't?
Well, I kind of wanted to write what I know, right? So I'm a Jersey guy. I might have been born in Brooklyn, New York, like many people from Jersey, but I literally had like a cup of formula there. I've been in Jersey like 56 years. And, so I knew kind of the layout. Doug as the pro, he's a composite of a lot of golf pros I know, and Windsor Hills, which is the course that the book is set at, his club, his dad's club. Um, it's kind of like a composite course. So I just wanted to kind of write what I know. And that was pretty easy. It's set in like Western New Jersey, but I add so much of my own life to it, from restaurants I frequent, bars I go to, ice cream places I go to in my town here. But I didn't want to have the golf course in my town. So I came up with a fictitious golf course in a fictitious town. It's kind of like a poor man's Pine Valley, but it's a very good golf course. They have MGA events there. They're trying to get more events now to stave off, this real estate developer throughout the course of the story.
What's the club represent to Doug?
The club represents to Doug, comfort, family, a steady routine, and really it represents, the game of golf. I go out of my way to, there's no catering hall, there's no pickleball courts. It's a golf course for golfers, middle class, upper class, and it really represents a safety place for him, quite frankly. And it's where he learned the game predominantly, and where he came back to, live out his life. And he really just at like in his late 50s wants to just finish up there, but he's got these new things coming at him, like a real estate development company and some other things that people will read in the book.
So, from your own website here, it says Fairways and Greens is the father of no nonsense philosophy. Play smart, avoid the chaos, keep emotions out, give yourself a putt for par. In real life, are you more of a Fairways and Greens or a let's see what happens from the trees type of guy?
Well, I'm a 9.3 index. I will say that I've got, a one shot shape swing now that's kept me more in the fairways. But I am a gambler by nature. I'm going to watch my P's and Q's. I really don't have a filter when it comes to like personal life or stuff like that. But I've tried to be more of hit it back into the fairway, take your penalty. But I'm also a football guy. I played high school and college football back in the day. So the football player in me somewhat comes out, and I might, try and hit that heroic 6-iron out of the thick rough where I should be playing a wedge back to the fairway.
Right on. What's the life version of Fairways and Greens? Is it routine, discipline, or humility?
I think it's a combination of all that stuff, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you want to strive to kind of stay in a lane, and hit the fairway, get on the green, give yourself a putt for par. But then, certain things come up, and Doug is facing a shot he's never had to play before from a life perspective. And unlike being a golf pro and knowing maybe, the risk reward of all those shots from a life perspective, he's not, he doesn't have the club in his hand. The rules that he's given to address this situation are stay the hell out and let it come to you. And, with a guy that's had a lot of control in his life, those are tough rules to follow. So then he has to kind of get a little, inventive on how he can affect the situation.
Let's talk about some of the themes from the book. Let's talk about like second chances, like rebuilding after a self-inflicted damage.
Sure. I mean, like, so, there's a bunch of other characters in the book, but, Doug is moving along, and he's, kind of doesn't think he needs second chances. But if you look at what he's doing in his life, he's a lifer, right? That, there's a scene in the book where he's trying to be someone's trying to bring him into their world for a little more, of a extended weekend, and that doesn't work with Doug. Doug goes to work. There's no vacation days in life is the line he uses. So at the end of the day, he's not really looking for second chances, but when he's faced with this situation, ultimately he does get a second chance, and he gets a second chance to have something that he never had in his life, nor did he think he'd ever have in his life. So that's like a more of a blind second chance. But there's a bunch of golf lessons in the book, Brett, where they're talking about second chances, and there is some golf strategy and stuff like that that's talked about that would kind of play in that regard.
How about like the family legacy, the father-son wisdom?
Yeah, so that's real important to me. The whole relationship of father and sons is explored and blown out, for lack of better wording, in this book. So there's a couple of different ways that's done, right? So first of all, Doug's father taught him the game. Doug's mother passes away before the book even starts, and it's him and his dad. They have a very close relationship. He's junior. His father is very proud of him. He still talks about his, conquests in junior golf and on the pro circuit. So there's a very, very close relationship with Doug and his dad, having Douglas Sr. being, the club pro emeritus at Windsor Hills. So that's definitely personified in the book. But then there's another kind of subplot, which is this, this Corn Ferry golfer and what it's like to play in the shadow of his dad, who's a major winner on tour and is making a comeback on the senior tour. And that pressure and that dynamic, which, I kind of pulled from real golf, right? I was always like a Jack Nicklaus guy. And then, you had Gary Nicklaus trying to live in his dad's shadow. Then you had the whole Stadlers with Kevin and Craig, and then the Haas son. So that was something that always kind of interested me, that burden of the kid trying to live up to their father's glory and records in golf, and how tough it is. So that's another dynamic that I kind of expand upon and kind of work through in the book.
What do you want the reader to feel when they close the book?
Sure. So, it was, I think I mentioned this to you when we first spoke. Fairways and Greens, a novel, right? Started as a screenplay. And the quick story on that is, I've been writing on and off freelance wise for 30 years, and have done a bunch of different stuff in television and comedy and speech writing and new media. And about, 15 years or so ago, I was writing scripts, and I had an opportunity based off of a relationship I had built with someone to get a script to Michael Douglas. And I knew that he was, interested in golf, and he was looking for something to do with his dad. His father was still alive at the time. So I came up with this story based on a couple of different themes that I was playing around with in my mind, and came up with this story of Fairways and Greens, beginning, middle, and end. Well, like anything else, and I talk about this in some Instagram posts, life got in the way. When I finally had the conceit for this down and a treatment that was worth sharing, Michael and Catherine Zeta-Jones were off to Europe. The meeting never happened, and it sat around for a while. But even back then, I was kind of like done with the Hollywood themes that you see in sports fiction or sports movies. It always has to be like somebody that no one ever heard of, coming out of the weeds to win the US Open over Tiger Woods, or some guy that, comes from a pitch and putt course, hits a magical 3-wood, and it's an albatross, and he wins the Open Championship. Stuff that never happens. So what I wanted to give like-minded folks, like me, like you, people who like to read, people who love the game of golf. Now, mind you, I've given the book to a bunch of my buddies, and it sits on their desks, and their wives read it, and they don't know anything about golf, and they love the book. So it's not just for golfers. But what I want to give the reader is something that I think is missing, and that's a story about real people, real problems against the backdrop of golf. Because I just don't think that's been done. Because, you've always seen in movies or books, you see people that are lawyers, politicians, construction workers, plumbers dealing with issues. Why can't they be golfers who go home? I mean, you see it. Tiger Woods had his issues, but they always talk about the golf. They never talk about what happens when he goes home. Or, recently, Brooks Koepka and his wife have been very public about her miscarriage, stuff like that. Regular problems and issues that happen with people, I put against the backdrop of golf. And that's what I want people to come away with, a story about real people, character driven, believable, that's set against the backdrop of golf, that has a true beginning, middle, and end, that's non-derivative. And they come away with saying, wow, that was a good read. I was very interested in those characters and very interested in the way Rich gave me a redemption story that isn't your typical kind of like, the guy is in rehab, he comes out and he changes the world. That doesn't happen in life. What happens in life is what happens in Fairways and Greens, a novel.
Was there a theme that surprised you while writing or something that showed up on its own?
Absolutely. There are many of them. The first thing is that, as I mentioned, it was a screenplay. So screenplays are predominantly dialogue, not a lot of narrative, right? So meaning, you say they were playing at a golf course, and then you just go through maybe the swings, the holes, and it's all dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. So maybe it's 70% dialogue, 30% narrative, reading, then he moved over to the second hole and pulled out his driver, blah, 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 blah. In a book, it's the opposite, right? So when I finally finished the first pass at the adaptation of the screenplay, meaning I converted a lot of the short narrative to long narrative with a lot of description, and then worked in different types of dialogue tags with the dialogue, I only had about 130 pages of a manuscript. I needed 3x. I needed to be close to 400 to get a real novel, especially double spaced. So then I had to start writing bridge chapters, and I had to start enhancing the characters more. And I started to find some of the characters that had minimal parts. I gave them more depth, and then they started to become more of the story than I thought they ever would. That was one of the first themes. So it was just like some of these characters got more, got deeper, more emotional, because they had to, because I needed to talk more about them. And then even the plot changed a little bit. And I felt as though I had a better way to give you the ending with all the different stuff I changed before it. It just gave me so much latitude, and I had so much more to bring into the conclusion for the reader just by really adding so much more to it. I also think another theme was that, at the end of the day, it made sense, and that you can have some of those lessons through golf that you talk about, second chances, always practicing, dealing with ups and downs. They do correlate to golf. So even more of those lessons that you always hear about, the metaphor of golf and life, I started to see more of those in what I wrote, and it became more of a living, breathing kind of a metaphor for me.
A lot of golf fiction misses the texture of golf. How did you the golf moments feel real without turning it into a rule book?
Well, that's a great question, because it's very difficult to describe a golf shot. And there's one chapter where they have a match. There's a match that's not just more than what happens in a lesson bay and stuff like that. And what really helped me with that was an editor, right? So the book is self-published, and it's only self-published for one reason. That is because I have been a business guy my whole life in parallel with having a freelance writing career. And I didn't want to deal with any of the BS that comes from the publishing houses. I didn't want to deal with entering a contest or kissing some literary agent's ass. It cost me less than I spend in a weekend up at Saratoga in the summer, playing Saratoga National, gambling on horses, and going out for, great dinners with my buddies every year. It costs less than that to self-publish this book. So once I was committed to self-publishing the book, I hired an editor. The editor I hired is a friend who's also a nationally awarded and recognized columnist for the USA Today that's written golf. So he really pointed out that sometimes less is more. And a lot of that less is more was around what you asked, the texture of golf. So I kind of brought in more of the strategy, more of like the setup, and then more of the outcomes and what the risk reward was when I described certain shots. Sometimes I summarized it a little bit. I wanted to make sure that people understood that, Windsor Hills, was a very difficult golf course to play. And there are a couple of holes played at Windsor Hills. But then when they go to, let's say, the Corn Ferry event, they're playing on a very burnt out course in Dallas. They go to an event in Louisiana, and they're playing on a course that's got a lot of water. And I talk about some of the hazards and the penalties that the golfers on those courses face, the alligators and stuff like that. I make a comment that the guy, instead of saying strokes gained, he led the round in alligators hitting regulation, stuff like that. So I tried to be a little different in how I did it. I also looked at some other books that were written about golf, fiction, nonfiction, and tried to maybe incorporate some of the stuff and build on some of that stuff. But it is difficult, to write golf. I'm working on the sequel now, and there's going to be some golf in it. And I'm really going back to the first one and seeing how I did it, because I want to use some of it and I want to make it better.
Which scenes were the easiest to write?
Oh, that's an easy one. The scenes that were the easiest were the ones that I've experienced myself. There's a lot of my own experience in there. I've lived a great life. Married, have 2 kids. I've done very well in my career, so I've played a bunch of great courses. So a lot of the golf stuff, a lot of the bets, a lot of the country club locker room stuff, a lot of the bar stuff is all homage to my buddies. The songs that are in there are all songs that I sing. So, you have to write what you know. And I think sometimes, some young authors, they struggle because they don't know enough. They haven't lived. I've been a bartender. I've been traveling the country and the world on business trips. I have kids that are in their late 20s that I've coached, and I see all their friends and I see what they do when I go to a bar. And like I said, there's an underlying story in this book about a Corn Ferry pro and what he does and doesn't do. And, he's based on my kids and their friends and what I see them do when they're, drinking in my house or at a bar doing shots. So that was kind of easy to kind of bring in because I've had so many, tangible life experiences. The golf stuff was hard. Some of the golf pro stuff was hard. So thankfully I know a lot of golf pros and they helped me out a little bit.
What was your favorite chapter or scene?
I'm going to be honest with you. I think the prologue, because the way it came to be, which I'll tell you about, and then the last chapter. I think the last chapter is some of the best writing I've ever done.
Right on. Is there one line in the book that feels like the heart of it?
I think there's a bunch, but that's a great question. I didn't expect that question. Is there one line? No, but I think there's a couple of. I think the last paragraph is kind of sums up the whole book, and that guys that are constantly out, trying to hit fairways and greens, every once in a while they're rewarded. And maybe in golf, it's an ace, or maybe it's a birdie to win an event. But in life, it's just maybe getting an unexpected gift. And I think that's kind of like that last paragraph talks to that a little bit. I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't opened the book in like 5 months. So I don't even remember what's in the book. I just I get a lot of reviews now on Goodreads or Amazon, and people say, I love that chapter. I'm like, what happened in that chapter? I've put on my marketing hat now and my podcast hat.
Yeah, no, I feel that.
That's a great question. What I can do is I can look, and if I find one that sticks out, there are no off days in life was a good one. There's a bunch of funny ones in there, which are just jokes that I've used or lines I've used. But like I said, if you're in a bar or on a golf course, or I should say, if there's a scene in a bar on a golf course, then it was probably right out of the Rich Poggi life.
You got to read the book, everybody listening, to find out.
Well, it's funny because a bunch of people I put, that one of the toughest things to do when you write a book is, especially since, and again, I'm very cognizant of PGA of America professionals. I respect them. Some of them are my closest friends. So I wanted to make sure that Doug was a representation of those folks, the 29,000 of them. Now, there is one pro that's a little bit of a jerk off, but, every once in a while you get one of those. But Doug Parker and his father, Doug Parker Sr., they are like the quintessential textbook PGA professionals. And they were easy to name. Douglas came from Michael Douglas. Douglas and Douglas Parker Sr., right? That was easy. But then I had to start naming people. And every once in a while, I would just throw one of my friends' names in there because it was so much easier to come up with a name. Then when I had some people read it, they were like pissed that they weren't in it. My goddaughter was pissed she wasn't in it because her one of the hostesses was named Amanda, and she thought that was her sister. And I said, no, she just named Amanda. And she's like, well, that's my sister. I said, but there's 1,000 people. No, you put her in it, not me. And then I had to put her in. Then I had to do a find and replace to put the name Ashley in there like 12 times. So that was kind of interesting. So dropping names in and knowing what the names were and what they weren't. And then I started doing a lot of like IE names just by nature. And then you go through with your editor. It's like, no, you got to have, too many names start with A. You have a couple of C's. And then we use some assistive AIs, a thing called AutoCrit, which shows you how many words you've used that are the same. And then it's like, wow. So it's kind of interesting, kind of editing the book.
Well, let's learn a little bit about you. I like to do this every now and then with interviews, is a lightning round. I'll ask you a couple questions and you just fire away whatever you feel here.
Oh, it's a podcast. So do I have to watch my mouth or no?
No, man. You say what you want.
All right, cool.
Let's start with this one. What's the most pressured shot? Is it the first tee at the member guest, or is it a 5-footer to win?
5-footer to win by far. I feel zero pressure golfing. I could golf tomorrow with Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods, and I would hit a good tee shot. I might shoot 100 or 120, but I would feel no pressure.
Right on.
I can't. I am the worst putter. I'd be a 7 if I was a good putter.
So maybe I already know the answer to this one. What's the favorite club in the bag and why?
Oh, that's a great question. The favorite club in my bag is my 54-degree sand wedge because I do old school. I open it, I close it, I hit a bunch of different shots with it. There's a whole portion of the book where Douglas Sr. is given a tip and a lesson, and all he does is change the loft of his club in his hand. So it's definitely my 54-degree sand wedge is my most favorite club.
Nice. Big miss, right into the trees or left into the water?
Oh, I'm a short right miss because I'm a fader. So if I don't get through it, it's a short right miss. And on certain courses, that's in hell. That's either in the water or in bad bunkers. I have a short right miss.
Dream foursome, anyone living or dead?
Wow, that's a great one. The dream foursome is myself and my 2 kids and let's say Tiger Woods. 3 of the 4 are always going to be my kids and who I play with all the time, but that's my dream foursome. And then the 4th one could be anybody. It could be my buddy Michael Breed. It could be Tiger Woods. It could be Lee Trevino. It could be Jackson Dart. It could be John Harbaugh. It could be anybody. But as long as those first 3 are my sons and me, that's all that matters.
Very cool. All right, Rich, who should read the book? Is it golfers only or anyone who's ever had to rebuild?
We're not going to talk about like drinks or like, stuff like that. Tito's and Club.
All right, all right, let's go back to that. Let's see.
Tito's and Club.
What's your favorite drink to mix at the bar when you were a bartender?
It's 2. Tito's and Club or a Guinness.
Right on.
Doug Parker Jr. is a big Tito's and soda guy. And I'm Bruce over Bon Jovi. I'm Jersey. You got to be a Bruce.
Beautiful. All right, Rich, who should read the book? Golfers only or anyone who's ever had to rebuild?
Listen, I found that the book is being well received. It's tough, Brett, because I have a good network, through my career and LinkedIn and socially. I've lived in the same town for almost 35 years. I've been on boards, I've coached, so I know a lot of people. So I think there's some subjectivity to some of the reviews I've been getting. But, now 75% of the books that are in circulation are to new people that I don't know. And I think it does cross over to people who don't know golf. But the sweet spot is people who read. And I found, quite frankly, you could read all the statistics. Not a ton of people read. More nonfiction than fiction. But when I find people that like to read, they say it's an easy, well worthwhile read that they really enjoyed, like Around the Golf. They really enjoy the book. So it's anyone that wants to read a good story with real believable characters. And, if they like it, they can email me. If they don't like it, they could email me. I got a great review today from a buddy of mine who's a writer. And he said, I had a problem with this. And I said, thank you. I should have spent more time on that, but he liked the other 95% of it. So I'll do better next time.
Rich, where do you want people to find the book and maybe even find you? Do you got a personal website or a place you want people to buy the book?
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question. So the book is available for anybody who wants it, and it's easy to get. You could go to my website, richpoggi.com. That's Rich, P as in Peter, OGGI.com. And then when you get there, you could buy it from my publisher site, which all the books were published and printed in New Jersey. That was very important to me. You can get an 18% discount. There's 18 chapters in the book, hence 18 holes on a golf course. And then you pay the shipping, or you can go on Amazon, or you can go on barnesandnoble.com or iBooks, wherever you buy either paperback books or ebooks. I'm available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all those sources. Or you could send me an email, Rich, R-I-C-H, at richpoggi.com, and I'll sign one for you, and I'll put it in the mail, and I'll give you the 18% discount, and you'll get the book, and then you'll have some communication with me if you're interested in that. And I found that that's been working out just as well as the other avenues. I'm selling many more books than I thought, and I'm just trying to get it in the hands, Brett, of like-minded people who are interested in a good read.
Well, we'll definitely have it on the network here, and we'll put the link in the show notes for the listeners. But I appreciate your time, Rich. I think the book it looks amazing. I'd love to hear the feedback from our audience as well. So leave comments, follow Rich. And again, thank you for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm also on all the social channels. The best one is at Rich Poggi on LinkedIn. I'll post this. And again, Brett, I appreciate being your first author.
Yes, you are.
being one of your early guests, and I'm really stoked about where this is going. And I look forward to recommending people to you and building a relationship with you. So I'm really glad we got to meet. And what I'll tell you along those lines, Brett, is that that's been the best part of this. I am not doing this for the money. Like I said, I could spend more on a long weekend in Saratoga that it cost me to do this book. And, although I have a marketing budget now, I'll sell books to cover my costs. That's not what it's about. I've met so many people. I did a golf show the other day. I'm doing a book club next week. I've met so many people, and the common theme is golf. And that's what it goes to show you, is that golfers are just different kinds of people. And, you could hook up with someone as a single on a golf course and shoot the breeze for 18 holes. And I do it at book signings, and I'm interacting with people, and it's really cool. They say, I love this. It felt like my club. Or, you know what? I didn't love the book because I play so much golf. I don't want to read a golf book, but I really loved the ending. That was really cool. When's it going to be a movie? I'm like, I don't know. That's not up to me right now, but let's just sell some more books and get more people to read it.
It's an amazing community, and I hope nothing but success for you. So, again, appreciate your time, and we'll hopefully get the word out about your book. Thanks again, Rich.
Thank you, Brett. Have a great rest of your day out there in Washington.
That's Rich Poggi, everybody. Go out there and buy his book, Fairways and Greens. And while you're at it, make sure you're following the Golf Podcasts USA Network. Our full catalog is on golfpodcast.org, and we have shows in all 50 states. I'm Brett Smith, and always remember to tip your cart staff.